Hello, welcome to ZIM Capture number 10. I'm inventor Dan Zen, and ZIM at zimjs.com is an open source library to help you code interactive media on the HTML canvas using JavaScript and Create.js. In this capture, I'd like to take a look at dragging multiple things that are held within a Create.js container. We'll also take a look at how to drag within bounds. Now there's a couple other places on the site where we've done that already. One is in the ZIM Learn, so if you go into the ZIM Learn section, well, let's go there. You can scroll down. Interaction and motion to nesting and tiling. So nesting and tiling is one place there. And scrolling back up, back to ZIM. The other place is in the ZIM bits. There's a couple ZIM bits that deal with dragging. One is drag and drop a copy. Another one down below on tiling is related to putting multiple things within a container. Okay, but let's try coding it ourselves. And to code it ourselves, we'll go into the ZIM frame area here and pick a template, the fit template. Now we've done captures on this template and stuff like that, so we don't really need to do that anymore. If I go Control U, I can grab the code. I've already grabbed the code and it's sitting here in Atom for me. So once again, it's using a fit frame scaling mode, but we've gone over that in other captures. So we'll ignore that. We'll come right down to where it says, put your code here. You can delete this code. And indeed, we will delete the default button. Okay, let's just start with a simple drag. So that looks like this. We'll make a circle. Var circle equals a new zim.circle. And we'll leave it the default circle. We will then add this to the stage by centering it. So zim.center round bracket circle on the stage. Like so. That also adds it to the stage. And then we'll start dragging it. Zim.drag round brackets circle. Okay, so let's save that and see what happens. And let's see, I'll open it up in a browser. Open browser. There we go. So there's our circle, default black circle, probably a radius of 50 or something like that. And now you see the drag gives us the finger there. Thank you. And now we can drag that, but we can drag it right off the stage if we want to. Okay, let's make some changes to this then. For instance, let's make our circle 70 in diameter and have a color. Now we can do color blue like that if we want to. So any HTML color word, refresh here. Now we get a blue circle in the middle. That could be a hex value, so we could make a gray, number sign 33, well, let's do sort of DDD, there's a light gray, and save that and refresh. Now almost looking white, still dragging. I tend to, and let me just show you this, for colors, I have a lot of colors that relate to ZIM specifically. We've got 6 colors that we use over and over again, and instead of having to remember the hex, they were specifically tuned, they're like some weird hex numbers, rather than remember those all the time. I threw them all into ZIM frames, so I'll often in the ZIM bits you'll see this, something like frame.pink. Okay, so I threw them into ZIM frame as properties, and that allows me to make this really quickly. You guys can make use of those colors too, but you probably won't. I maybe shouldn't have put them in there. It's just taking up a bit of your space in a sense. But hey, that's no big deal. So frame.pink right there. And refresh. Oops, refresh. And there's a pink circle. Now, a little bit later, we're going to be doing multiple versions of these. We might want a border on them. So if we set a border, frame.gray, how did I spell gray? I think I spelled it that way. Or just put whatever color you want there. And now we have a little stroke around that. You can set that stroke thickness as well. I think it's an X parameter, 5. And we save that and refresh here. Now we've got a slightly thicker stroke on that circle. Okay, that looks all right. So how do we drag this within bounds? Let's make some bounds. Well, the bounds that we're going to use is some sort of rectangle will be the next parameter in the ZIM drag. So let's just go out and check out the ZIM drag parameters first. So we'll open up a new tab, open up ZIM, go to our docs. It's always handy to have the docs around. Scrolling down, we get to the ZIM create. That's where the drags are. So ZIM create mode, and there's the drag function, and we'll copy all of these parameters. There's lots of them. Now we can go over these parameters and look at the drag a bit more closely, like so. The first parameter is an object, so what object are we dragging? And when I do say, hey, you need to put an object here, I usually use the parameter obj. Occasionally, if I have two objects, like if I'm doing a hit test and you're testing to see if these two objects are hitting, then I might call them A and B. But for the most part, it's obj. Then it's looking for a rectangle, and anytime I'm wanting to specify a rectangle, I call it rect. So that's the thing that we're going to do next, and so we'll leave it for now. Over cursor, we can change the cursors for the over cursor and the drag cursor. Current target, we'll see how that works as well. If the current target is set to false by default, and that just means that it will pick up anything that you clicked on within a container. So that's if you put the drag on a container, it will pick up the thing that you clicked on inside it. And that's indeed what we're going to be doing, that example. But if we don't want that, if we want the whole container with all the things inside it to move, then we would set current target to true. So I'll try and remember to show you that. Swiping, sometimes an object, if we're dragging it, and we've got a swipe event set from the ZIM pages, it might be confused as to what you're wanting to do. Are you wanting to swipe this or are you wanting to drag it? So I believe that's set to false by default. It won't swipe something that can be dragged, but if you want to adjust that, you can. Local bounds means the rectangle we're making, and by default is set to the stage coordinates. We could set the rectangle to the actual object's parent if we wanted to with local bounds. On top means that whatever we press on, that defaults to true. Whatever we press on comes up to the top, and we'll see that in action. Now these are new ones, these end ones here. Surround means that instead of the rectangle containing what you're dragging, you know, the thing that you're dragging is smaller and it's within the rectangle and won't go outside the bounds. Surround means the thing that you're dragging is bigger than the bounds, and you don't want the thing that you're dragging to come within the bounds, like the edges of them to come within the bounds. So that would be like a sliding site. Imagine you had a big site and you want to slide it around in your window, but you want to keep the site within the window rather than have it, you know, start showing the edges. A little hard to explain. Slide and slide damp and slide snap relate to throwing the page or throwing the object. So you can throw the object and have it sort of glide to a stop. Slide snap means it will snap back to the bounds. Okay, so you could throw it past the bounds and it would snap back into the bounds, or indeed if it's a sliding site, you could see the edge, but then it would snap back to the bounds, much like the iPhone when you're scrolling too far and it snaps back. That's that kind of stuff. Reg means that it will snap to your registration point when you pick it up. Currently, if we try this, I pick that up. If I pick it up from the top right hand corner, it picks up from there. Whereas reg, if I picked up from here, this thing would jump, so the registration point would now, which is the center there, the registration point would jump to my finger. Remove tweens just relates to the fact that if you're trying to drag something that is tweening, sorry, they can conflict one another. You're dragging it here, but it's trying to animate to there. That conflicts. So by default, I think that's set to true. Anything you pick up, it will take the tween off it so that it drags smoothly. But you might be able to handle that in other ways. So I do let you say, hey, let's leave that conflict happening, and you might be able to fix it in other ways. I'm not sure. So those are the parameters of dragging. We want to specifically just look at the rectangle, though, or the rect. And for that rectangle, we make a new create.js rectangle. So var, say rect or bounds perhaps is equal to a new create how do you do that again? Create.js dot rectangle, and in round brackets we put the parameters for that rectangle. So this rectangle is an invisible rectangle in a sense, or a code rectangle, or a virtual rectangle, and it starts with x and y positions. So let's try 100 comma 100 for instance. And then the next rectangles could be done in two ways. We could put the coordinate of the right-hand corner, or top right-hand corner, or the x farthest to the right. But that's not how Create.js works, and nor how Flash worked, I think. We now put the width of the rectangle and then the height of the rectangle. So we've got the x and y of the rectangle, it's top left corner, and then the width and the height. So we imagine if we do 300 and 200, like so. Now remember, we're in the fit mode, so in the fit mode we're dealing with a width of 1024 and a height of 768. So a width of 300 is only sort of a third of that, or maybe something like that anyway. So let's save that up and see what happens. Oh, that's the bounds, but we have to pass that bounds in as the second parameter to the drag. So comma bounds, or boundary. Bounds might not be the best word to use because every shape has bounds. Boundary or rect. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. So we save that. We come in here and a refresh. Right away, something's a little bit odd. The circle is no longer centered, and I wonder why that is. I know. Do you know why? It's because we're at the bottom right-hand corner of those bounds. So you can see now it's dragging only within this rectangle that we specified, and that's how big that is. So this center, the registration point, is 0, 0. It's a 0, 0, but it's now moved over to 100, 100. That's the far corner. I can't move. And then this is the width of 300, and that's the height of 200. So it's only allowed to be in there, and so the ZIM drag is moving that over so that it sits within the bounds that we specified. Cool, huh? All right, if we don't drag, maybe before we drag, we'll let it center, but I'd like to show you just to remind you where that registration point is. So we can go zim.outline circle, like so. And a refresh. So just to remind you, the registration point is at 0, or sorry, in the center of the circle. So when we drag this around, this registration point is staying within the bounds. Oh, I suppose we could have left the drag in there. It will still, because we outlined it after the drag was set, it goes to the right place. I was just worried that it's going to do something like that. And remember that when we show the outline, it's not a dynamic outline. It's only at that one time that it's doing that. Okay, so great. Now what we usually do is we would usually want to drag it on the whole stage though, without going outside the stage. So we're going to try and set that up. Just before I do, let me show you what happens when we drag, say, with no height. It's kind of special. All right, so now we're starting x and y of 100, a width of 300 that we're allowed to move, but we cannot drag it in the y direction. Can you imagine what that will do? There it is. And now I'm trying to drag it in the y, but it won't. So it only drags along a line. So we can use that for the knob of a slider, for instance, and that's the technique we use. If we wanted the slider going up and down, we would not allow it to drag in the x. Okay, let's set it up so that we can't drag it off the stage. So then our rectangle would become 0, 0, the stage width, and the stage height, and we save that up. And let's see what happens. Great, now it can start in the center, and as we drag, oh, it went off the stage. Why did it do that? But look, the registration point is what's staying inside those stage bounds. So that may be all right for you. Maybe you don't mind that. I usually want it to just hit like that and not go any further, but at least you can still drag it. So now I can't move it, so I can't drag it anymore after, you know what I mean? I can't put it right off. Let's try and make it so that it just touches though, because that would be, I think, the normal procedure there. We have to then move it in a width of the circle. So instead of that, we would say circle dot width divided by 2. So half the width of the circle and half the height of the circle. Those are really the same thing because we got a circle, but we'll change it to height there. So now let's see what happens. We save that up and refresh. Ooh, isn't that magical? Now note that there is a bit of an issue with the stroke. The stroke being thicker is actually going off the edge. I forgot about that. You might have to accommodate for that stroke. If you don't mind, I'm not going to bother. But on this side, we run into a problem. Look, it goes right off. That's because we've started the rectangle here. So we start the rectangle here, half the width, and yet we're still going the whole stage width. So now that goes the whole stage width right off. So we have to subtract the width of the circle from the right-hand side. And that might be slightly confusing for you. You'll just have to think about that. Width, the whole width. And you might be wondering, why isn't it the width divided by 2? Well, I think if you do that, you'll find that it then goes halfway off the stage on the right-hand side, so you need to subtract the whole width. And that's just a bit of mathematics. I'm sure you'll be able to figure that out. Circle dot height, like so. Okay, so we refresh, and now, sure enough, we're within the stage. Woot! Woohoo! Woohoo! Okay, good. Now, the next thing that I wanted to show you was how to make multiple circles and drag them all around. Okay, to make multiple circles, we do a loop. First of all, we should figure out where we're going to put these multiple circles. If we put them on the stage just directly, made a new circle, throw it on the stage, we would have to drag each one individually. Drag circle 1, drag circle 2, drag circle 3, etc. But there is a way to drag multiple things all at once, or well, not all at once, but with one drag. And that is if we put the objects into a container. Then we can just put the drag on the container, and the default behavior of ZIM drag is it will drag whatever you clicked on inside the container. And that's one of the powerful things about this system that we inherited from Flash, maybe even from Director. All right, so we need a container, and let's try. So var holder, I'll often call it holder, is equal to a new, that does not say create JS dot container, like so. Now a container is a display object that has nothing in it until you put something in it. So we're going to soon put things in there. We would add that to the stage then, stage dot add child holder. We're not centering this, we just want it to go at 0, 0. If we center it, we start getting confused, I think. So we're putting this at 0, 0, so that's it added. And now the circle, instead of putting the circle on the stage, we are just going to say holder dot add child circle. So there we are, putting the circle inside that holder. Now we're dragging the circle still at this time, but let's just see if this works. We should see a circle up there in the left-hand corner, which we do. Now the circle has once again been kept within the bounds. If we didn't have the drag on it, I think we would have seen the circle show up off the edge. Shall we try? So we have no drag. Drag is putting that circle, putting what we're dragging inside that bound. So I save that. I refresh here, and indeed there it is, and I can't drag. Now, if we didn't supply the bounds, I could have dragged and it wouldn't have moved that circle. But anyway, fine. So next step then, we've got one circle in there, and yet we want a whole bunch of circles in there. So let's make a whole bunch of circles. And that's for var I equals 0 to I is, say, less than 10, for instance. And increase our I each time. So there's our loop, standard for loop. And we'll put the var circle, all this stuff, inside that loop. So it will make 10 circles. Now we're only supposed to declare once, so we'll copy the declaration outside here. And take it off of inside, no big deal. And now we've got a whole bunch of circles. We're going to add them, add the circle that we made. So each one's a temporary circle. We're adding it to the holder. Now this drag of circle, that would just drag the last circle made. So we would end up being able to drag the last circle made. Let's just see what happens. I think that's what would happen. Yeah, and we can't drag these other circles that are positioned there. All right, so we now need to move to drag the holder. So when we say drag holder, there's a little bit of a tricky slight glitch here. But anyway, we're going to say drag the holder. And now when we refresh, sure enough, all of those things are put in the holder. And the holder is shifted over so that it's within that draggable region. It has the, I guess, the effect of still dragging these circles within here. And as you can see, I can pick up anything inside that holder. So that's kind of cool, isn't it? All these things are within the holder, but whatever I click on, that is what is being dragged. Now remember, we could turn that off by saying current target, this one right here, current target if we set that to false. Shall we do that? So object, rectangle, over cursor, drag cursor, comma, null. We'll just set those cursors to null because we'll take the defaults and get to the current target, and we will say true. So current target means instead of dragging what's in the holder, drag the whole holder. And so we save that and refresh. Oh. Well, now that we're dragging the whole holder, all those circles are placed at the same place. So we are indeed dragging all of those circles. Sorry, that's a little bit hard to see. You can actually tell if we throw a whole bunch of circles on the edges of these, are a little bit grumbly because it's got, 10 circles in behind there. Okay. So anyway, we don't want to do that, but that's the effect of it. Now the next thing we might want to do is spread those circles about randomly so that we can see a bunch of different ones. Now I just want to point out that we are running into a little bit of a problem in that we have these circles. Let me just show you. I suppose I can show you this way, I think. Zim.outline. Let's outline the holder. Okay, make sure we know what's going on. Will we be able to tell, though? We might not be able to tell. We're outlining the holder. We're outlining the holder. We're not outlining the circle. And can you see what's happened to the holder? The holder has moved in because the drag said you're supposed to stay within half the width of the circle. So it's actually moved in the holder. If we did not do the drag and take a look to see where our holder is, save that, refresh, you can see that the holder is at 0, 0 where we specified it. That's by default, it will be at 0, 0. So we've actually moved in the holder, and I'm not sure if that's going to affect us as we try and drag things around. I expect it might. It won't affect us as we drag things around. It'll affect us pretty well right now. What we're going to do is we're going to put a bunch of random, so I'm going to comment that out. We're going to put a bunch of random location, or we're going to move the circles to random places. Let's do that. That would look like circle.x is equal to zim.rand, and we specify, well, how about we'll just do 0 to the stage width. So zim.rand can receive 2 parameters, like 0 to stage width. Okay, that would be fine. Or if it's by default, if you just pass in 1 parameter, it starts at 0 to that 1 parameter. So that would be a random number from 0 to the stage width. And we do the same thing for the circles y. Okay, now that's not quite right. If I save this, we'll see why it's not quite right. It will do the random numbers for us. But look at that one. That one's way down there. And these ones are fine. I'll refresh that. There, some of them off the stage, all that kind of thing. All right, so it's not quite working. We need to bring this random number in so that so these circles do not go off the stage. So that would be similar to our drag technique here. We would copy that and say, let's start the random number at half the width of the circle. So remember, circle's registration point is in the center. And then we will go to the stage width minus half the width of the circle. Now this is a little bit different than what we did before. This is the right-hand X position. Or randomly we're trying to position it to the right-hand X position. It is not the width of the rectangle like it was here. This is the width of the bounding rectangle. So we had to subtract the whole circle width in that case. Once again, a little bit of math, but not too much. All right, so we're going half the registration point in to the stage width minus half the registration back, and we want a random number between those two. And then it will be something very similar for the circle's y. So it would be the circle's height and circle's height. Oh, by the way, I think I just saw that I had width left there, random width, but really wanted the stage height. Stage height. Okay, does that look good? Now, let's do ourselves a favor. We're going to take off the Zim drag for now because that, like I said, creates this little glitch, and we'll get to that in just a second. And let's just see if these are now loading within the stage. So I'm refreshing, and sure enough, we are putting these circles in the holder, and you can see they're going right off to the right-hand edge. There's one going almost to the left-hand edge. They'll come close. They're close to the bottom. Okay, they're being positioned randomly on there. Close to the top, etc. But now, unfortunately, when we go to drag it within, when we go to drag the holder within the bounds, it will make sure that the holder stays within the bounds that we set. But remember, we're going to run into a problem because the holder could be as wide as the stage. So it's going to push this off. The default behavior will be to push it, make sure that nothing is half the circle's width or height from here. So we'll see everything pushed over a bit, including ones that will go off the stage on the right and on the bottom. Okay, so it's just picking up this whole holder, which used to be the whole stage, and say, nah, you're trying to fit in the X and Y position of that rectangle, and that's the one it's choosing as a default. So to fix that, I'll just tell you quickly, to fix it, we need to adjust the registration point of the holder so that it is moved in half that. It's moved in this amount. And we don't even know that amount yet because it's right there. So we'll just hard code it for now, or we could put it in a variable. But anyway, here's the fix of that sort of stranger glitch. Sorry about that. I don't think there's much I can do about it in Zim. Is equal to 70. And indeed, that's what we'll do with the reg y as well. Copy, so we'll do that in the same line. Oops. Okay, so I think this will fix it. Now it will keep the registration point within our bounds here that we specified, and also keep the circles that we drag within those bounds. And let's try that and refresh. Do I have the drag going? Okay, those circles still drag within the bounds. They're all placed within the bound. They're still placed within the bounds. Remember last time we were getting stuff outside the bounds constantly, and now we're not getting anything outside the bounds, and yet we can still drag. Here are the effect, by the way. Here's the effect of the top. Okay, so that brings it to the top. And what was that? It was rect, current, swipe, drag cursor, rect, over cursor, drag cursor, on top. On top property. The on top by default is set to true. So when we refresh this, if I press something, it comes up on top. And that's usually the default behavior you want when you drag it. Okay, that was changed somewhere halfway along ZIM. We decided that that was probably the best thing to do automatically. If you don't want to do that, then you would set that to be false. Okay. Now remember ZIM Duo, if we were to set that to be false, the holder is the object, obj, colon. So I've turned to the ZIM Duo mode. We just did a capture on that. The bounds are called the rect. So the rect colon bounds. And finally on top is false, like that, like so. So do you see why we did that? We'd have to go a whole bunch of nulls to get to on top, do our counting, but I just swapped over to the ZIM Duo mode, passing in a configuration object, and we save that and refresh here. And now, well, we picked that one up. It was already on top here. We pick up that one. See how it doesn't come up on top anymore? Now, you may want that, but usually that you don't want that. Okay, you want it to come up on top. Alrighty. So there we go. That was a ZIM capture showing how we can put multiple objects into a container and then drag that around. Oh, should we just see that last one was called current target. So let's just put in the current target. One last thing, comma, current target colon true. So now I think we can see this a little bit better, that we're going to have a current target true. Let's hope this works. Refresh here, and now I pick up the whole current target, and it's a little bit odd because it's bigger than the bounds, so but you can see that the whole thing is moving. If we didn't have bounds, that's picking up the whole thing rather than the individual ones. Okay, and let's take that back off again. So once again, there were a few different places on the ZIM site that you can look more in and see code for dragging. I'm inventor Dan Zen. This has been a ZIM Capture to show us what's happening there in the dragging of multiple things within a container. Have a great day. Yeah, ZIM Capture number 10.